Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Yevamot daf Tzadi Dalid. We're going to begin on Tzadi Dalid, Amud Aleph, about 10 lines from the top. Omrli Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi. So we've been learning the discussion whether or not a Eid Echad is believed to be able to free up this woman so that she'll not need to do Yibum. Or, for example, they testify that the husband and child died, and the order was first the husband then the child, and therefore she would not have to do Yibum. There's only one witness, do we believe, in that situation. So, V'yarmulu Rav Achal Rav Ashi Tashma, Ein ha'isha ne'emenes loimer meis Yevami. A woman is not believed to say that the man that she was supposed to do Yibum with died. She'enaseh. And also she's not able to say that my sister died and to be able to enter into her home. So he labesa. No nehi deloy mehimna. So the dik is like this. We see that she's not believed. So it must be that one witness is believed. We see that Eid Echad is believed, just not her alone. So it's a raya. Whereas it's not necessarily it's a raya. After all, what taimech, according to your reason, name a seifa. Look at the seifa of the statement. What does the seifa say? Ein ha'ish neman loimer. A man is not believed to say meis achi, that my brother died. She'avim is ishtay, in order for yibum to be able to be done for this woman. V'lo meisa ishti. Person can't say that my wife died. She'esas ha'chaisa, in order for him to be able to marry the sister. So, who nihudol mehimin? So what do you want to tell me? That only he's not believed, ha'ed echad mehimin, but one witness in that situation does work. Now, bishul migabi isha mishum meguna kil b'rabbanan. When it comes to Eid Echad, we're lenient when it comes to women. One witness, we're going to allow her to get married to other people because we do not want her to be in a state of an aguna. So we're extra sensitive when it comes to women. Al Gabi Ish Ma'ika Meimar. We don't find that one aid would be enough when it comes to a man. But nonetheless, based on that, you would make the same diak. But why would that be the case when it comes to a man? El Ki Itzrach Rabbi Kiva Itzrach. The whole reason why this is mentioned is to teach us the din of Rabbi Kiva. We know that Rabbi Kiva is extremely strict, that even when it comes to Chavi Lavin, for example, she's supposed to do Yibum. However, instead she marries someone Lashuk. She marries someone else. So in that situation, that's a lav. That's Chavi Lavin. And in fact, the child will end up being a mamzer. So Ema, maybe we would say in that situation, the fact that we have, let's say, one witness saying that she's free to marry Lashuk, Chaisha Akilkula, the Zara B'daika, maybe she's going to be extra careful. So therefore, maybe in this case, we actually should believe her, because otherwise her kids would be mamzerim. Kamashmulan de kakula dida chaisha kakula de zarlo chaisha. Okay, so the kamashmulan is we don't believe her own eidos, but again, it's not necessarily proof when it comes to the case of Eid Echad. Rav Omer Eid Echad neman biyavama mikabel chaimer. Actually, it should be a kabel chaimer that in this case the Eid Echad should be believed to free her up. Well, Isser Kares Hitarta, in order to, we already mentioned that an Eid Echad is believed to say that you're obligated to do Yibum, and that otherwise would be an Isser Kares if it wasn't true. So Isser Lavel Kol Shekain, so certainly should be believed. It's Kabel Chaimer. So Armalei Hahum Rabban L'Rabba Hi Atzma Techiach. Then itself you could disprove. Why? Dil Isser Kares Hitarta, that maybe the only time he allowed it is because it's so strict that it's Isser Kares. Isser Lav Hitarta. When it comes to Isser Lav, for her to be able to marry Lashuk, maybe that we're not going to be lenient. So her herself, why is it that we don't believe her? Tivan de Zimnin de Sanule. Because what if she actually hates the person that she's supposed to do Yibum with? Daika Mitzvah, as we saw in the Sfar yesterday, that she won't be Medayik when it comes to looking into the matter, if it's true, and she'll just get married to this guy in the street because she doesn't like the other option of marrying this man, this Yavam. So it's possible he may say the same thing when it comes to one witness, and therefore she's not going to be daika mitzvah, and therefore because of that, maybe one aid is not believed. Zen Medrash Darsha Belezer ben Masya. So he said that when a person, the second guy, gives the get, it means nothing because she's married to the first person. So the only time the get means anything is only if it's someone who's actually married, and that will passel her to kahuna, but not in the situation you just give a get. So Rabbi Yehuda Marav Habilei Lerbelezer Lemedrash Be Marganisa. He darshaned this jewel, the darsh be chaspa, and he darshaned actually a piece of earthenware. My marganisa. So what's the jewel? The sign. It says v'isha grushim isha. If you'll niskarsha elam isha. Pasul kahuna. Behind reach haget the pasul kahuna. We said, for example, and we saw this before, a person makes a stipulation, he writes on a get and says to her, Hari megareshes me many. You're divorced from me, but you're not muteris to everyone else. At the very last line of a get, the 12th line is that she's muteris l'chol adam. However, Rashi says v'iat muteris l'chol adam. Shlonis garsha zul gamri. It's not a krisus. El isha nifrada. She's only separating from the husband, but not being free to anyone else. So that really isn't a get, but nonetheless, it's enough of a get to psula kahuna. Im meis v'huter li nase. She isn't like an almana, rather like a gerusha, and therefore she cannot marry a kohen in that situation. Behind reach a get the paisel kahuna. This is a situation like it smells like a get, has a reach a get, and therefore there'll be enough to passel her from kahuna. Question 5. Be'isha gerushim yishli kachu omer. So Yomi Rab the Abelezer lemedrash be marganisa v'darish be chaspa. So what was the jewel and what was the chaspa? What was the earthenware? So as we just saw, the jewel was even if he was not megarish except from the husband, kigain to hisna she'iyat muteris l'chol adam, still she's pasul to kahuna. What's the chaspa? Mi'isha below mi'isha eno isha. So we ended up saying in the Mishnah that the only time it's a get is if it's actually your husband, but not if it's someone who's not your husband. And it says in the brackets, so let's say she gets married because she thought her first husband died, and then turns out that the first guy didn't die, and the second guy gave a get. That get means nothing. So that's really chaspa. That's not much of a chiddush. But the bigger chiddush, the jewel, is that it's still a recha get, even though all he did was divorce her from himself, even though he did not matter her to the rest of the world. Let's see the next Mishnah. Misha holcha ishto medina siyam. Let's say in this situation, the wife goes to another country, ba'u ba'amrulo, and they come back and say to him, meis ishtacha. It's the opposite. Your wife died. Now in that situation, because the wife died, v'nasa es achaisa, you're allowed to marry a sister. If you're married to a woman, you can marry the sister provided that she died. If you just divorced her, you can't marry the sister. So he married this woman because he thought it was his first wife died. All of a sudden his first wife pops up. So he's allowed to marry her. He's allowed to remain with his first wife. Rashi says, the kedusha shnia ain't a klum. The second marriage was nothing. Arihu kaznus. It doesn't have any validity. We see later on Tzadi Hey, Osa shechivta osarta, ve'en shechivas achosa osarta. Okay, so let's now continue on Tzadi Daled Beis, the rest of the Mishnah. Umutter, because the second marriage is nothing, mutter b'kroiv shnia, ushnia muteris b'kroivov. Says Rashi, so your mutter in the second one's relatives, says Rashi, Lisa Bita. You can marry her daughter. The Kaimala Noisin al Hanusa Mafuta. So in this situation, you're not related. It's not like this woman, the second woman you were married to. You wasn't. You were still married to the first woman, the sister. And therefore, the second woman If you wish to marry her relatives, you're allowed. The Mesa Rishona, if let's say eventually the first wife actually does die, then Mutter Bashnia, then of course, then and only then he's allowed to marry the sister. Amrulo, let's say it was said to him that Mesa Ishto, your wife died. Benasa Esachaisa, and as we said before, he married the sister. V'yachar and then after he's already married, Amrulo, they said Kayemes, she actually was alive, Umesa, and then she died. Very similar to the Mishnah we saw before, it's just in the reverse. Now, we had children before this, while my first wife was alive, and also after my first wife died. So Havlad Rishon Mamzer, the children that were born while the wife was alive, the first wife, that is Mamzer because it's the sister. But after she died, in Mamzer, those children that you had are not Mamzer. Rav Yossi concludes this Mishnah with a cryptic statement: Kol sheposel alidei acherim, and who is posel through others, posel alidei atzmos, posel by himself. The chol shein posel alidei acherim, and who is not posel through others, and who posel alidei atzmos, not posel by himself. And on this, Rashi says, this is really going to be mostly discussed on the next daf, even though it's alluded to in the next few lines. So it says the Gemara, V'afa gab de ozol ishto v'giso medina siyam. Even if his wife and the brother-in-law go l'medinas hayam, says Rashi. What is this referring to? Giso is again your brother, your brother-in-law. Baal achais ishto, says Rashi. Your wife's sister's husband. Your wife's sister's husband, which is your brother-in-law. So he went to Medina Sayyam, Uva'id Echad, V'oimer Mesa Ishtacha. And someone said that your wife died. Says Rashi, Lazu Oimer Mes Balech. And to the other one they said, your husband died. V'amad Vanasa, so you end up marrying. V'yachach ba Ishto V'giso. And all of a sudden your brother-in-law and your wife are now in the picture. So in that situation, that is obviously problematic. Even though the Ozl Ishto V'giso Medina Sayyam, the Ahani Nesuin Dika Mitztara Eishes Gisai Agisai, that it helps this marriage that it's now going to aser the brother-in-law's wife onto the brother-in-law. Afil Hachi Eishes Giso Asira. We say only the brother-in-law's wife is aser. Ishto Sharia, but your wife, she's still mutter to you. V'lo Amrina, we don't say Mitaich Shenesra Eishes Giso Agisai, that since we aser the brother-in-law's wife on the brother-in-law, ti aser ishto olav, that also your wife should be aser to you. Okay. Now, lema masnisan delo Rabbi Akiva. Let's say our Mishnah that says that in this case where she comes back, you married the sister thinking that your first wife died, all of a sudden the first wife comes up, it says that you're allowed to return to her. Maybe that's delo Rabbi Akiva. Maybe Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says that you're not able to return back to your first wife. According to him, he says it's under the category of achas gerushasai, that this is the sister of a woman that you gave who is a divorce to, and you're not allowed to marry again an achas gerushasai. The only time you're allowed to marry a sister is only if she had died, but not achas gerushasai. The sanya kol arayos shebatara in srichas menu get. When it comes to having a rayos, you don't need a get because it's not a marriage. Chutz me'eshes ish, excluding if it's a married woman, shenises alpi beistin, as we saw in the beginning of the parak, that the beistin stepped in, namely because they said we're going to listen to one witness. So one witness said, yeah, your husband died, and then all of a sudden the husband walks up. So in that situation, we require a get in that case, because otherwise people are going to get confused and think in other circumstances a get's not required, as we saw before. Rabbi Kiva Moisif, he says, I'll tell you another time a get's needed. Also, bi'af eshes ach, when it comes to your brother's wife, bi'achos isha, or your wife's sister, v'kivan di'oim Rabbi Kiva boy get. So it's talking, we're talking about our case, and a get will need to be given. So mamela itztara alei. obviously it's saying that she's usher to you. Now it's considered to be like the sister of someone you did gerushin with. So if you have to give a get to the second wife, so you should not be able to go back to your first wife, because you're not allowed to. It gives it the impression that you were married to her, and once you're married to her, you can't be married to the other sister. So l'chaira, Rabbi Kiva would maybe hold not like our Mishnah, and Rabbi Kiva would say you're not allowed to go back to your first wife because it's achos gerushasai. V'lav itmarla im Rav Gidol im Rav Chiba Rab Bar Yosef im Rav Hai Eshes Ach Hechidami. Didn't we already analyze this? And we discussed the following. This case of Eshes Ach, it's your brother's wife. What's that? Kigun shekidish, focusing on that word. Shekidish achiv es ha'isha. That the brother only did kedushin to the woman, and they didn't do nesuin, but at that moment they separated. They went to a different country. And you heard that your brother died. Now again, he was mekadesh this woman. Now your brother died. So you stood up and you ended up marrying this woman. Now again, this is Eshes Ach, this is your brother's wife, but your brother died. So perhaps that means you're allowed to marry her al yidei yibum. The Amr Inshi. Now, what will happen? People will think Hach Kama, this first marriage, Tenahava le b'kedushin. There was some type of kedushin, some condition that was totally in this kedushin, and therefore that's the reason why that kedushin was nothing. V'hai shaper notzev, and the second man that came really married properly, even though he didn't. But people are going to think the first marriage was nothing, and the second guy is something, and therefore that's the reason why, in that case, we're going to require a get, because otherwise people are going to get confused and think, that's strange, why does they have to give a get? I thought the first marriage was nothing, even though it really was. V'hai achas isha nami. Also, when it comes to this case of your wife's sister, what was the case of Rabbi Kiva? Hechidami kigain shekidish es isha. The person only does kedushin to a woman, so you heard that she died. So because the woman died, the first wife died, so you marry the sister, which is perfectly fine because she's dead. The Amri Inshi, and then all of a sudden she's alive. So all people say, Hach kamaisa tanai havile b'kedusheha. Maybe the kedushin didn't count because there was some type of a condition that wasn't fulfilled. And therefore, when he married the second sister, it was an acceptable marriage. And it's not a case of achos ishto. He didn't marry your wife's sister. So therefore, in that situation, that's why you require a get. Davka for that reason. Ella nesuin miiko meimer tanahavile minasuin. We're not going to be able to say that in our case, which is a case of a Tanayim Nesuin. So therefore, in that situation, Rabbi Kiva will not require a get, and you'll be able to go back to your original wife. So since they were married to the first man, they all know the second one is nothing, even according to Rabbi Kiva. So she can go back to her first man, and no get is needed by the second man. Again, because it must be that way, because otherwise we understand the second marriage is nothing. So it must be that the first marriage is what counts, and therefore he can simply go back to her, to his original wife, and no get or anything is necessary. Mashen Kain, if it was only kedushin, so there it could be a little bit confused. We say, well, maybe they never did nesuin. Why not? They just separated and went to a different country right after kedushin. Maybe it wasn't really kedushin, and therefore people will think that the second one really is chal, and that's why we require a get. But otherwise, by nesuin, no. Armali Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. Bikiva lisni nami chamoisai. If you really want to say that this is a case of Rabbi Kiva, that we're establishing like Rabbi Kiva, so that because we originally said maybe it's not like Rabbi Kiva, so we said no, it could even be like Rabbi Kiva. So it's like Rabbi Kiva, so he should also include the case of one's mother-in-law. He says that even though a person is not allowed to have relations or marry your mother-in-law. However, according to Rabbi Kiva, he holds that after your wife died, there's no longer an Isser Sreifa, there's no Din Misa of having Tashmish with your mother-in-law after your wife had died. The Sanya, it says Be'esh Yisrafu, Oisoi Ve'eshen. That's a difficult language. What does it mean that we will do the punishment of Sreifa when you are married to a woman and her mother-in-law? So, also v'es achas mehen. It must be, dear Rabbi Shmuel, that you'll get sreifa, but only one of them. In other words, your mother-in-law. Only the one that, which is the mother-in-law. Because first you married this woman, which is a regular marriage. She didn't do anything wrong. She shouldn't be killed. It's the problem is that afterwards you were with the mother-in-law. So that's what it means. It means achas mehen, one of them. So therefore, it means the chamaisai. So that's what it's referring to. Only the man and the mother-in-law. Rabbi Kiva Omer also v'eshtehen. Actually, it's going to be both of them will be punished. That's hard to understand. That again, what does it mean that both of them? L'chayra, it means that even the first wife. Now, Bishul Mabai the Omer Mashmos Darshanikim Minayu, that really they only it's an explanation of the psukim, but there's no real nafkamina. Rabbi Shmuel savar chada ksiv, Rabbi Kiva savar tarte ksiv, shaper. So they just have different ways of reading the pasuk. El Rava the Amar chamosu achar misa kibenayu. According to him, he says no chamosu achar misa. There's the difference. That question again is: can you marry the mother-in-law after his wife's death? So listening now Chamaiso, so in our Mishnah, it should also mention the case of Chamoso as well. So Malay Nihi granted Dimi'ata Krab Misrefa. It's true that you're not going to get the death penalty. You can, if you after your wife's death, you're with your mother-in-law. Misura mi miati kra. Does the pasuk exclude the iser? It's still aser to do. It's just not an iser. You're not going to get a punishment of sreifa. So where it says v'ti aser b'shchiva de'achaisa. Why don't we aser the shchiva, the lying down with the sister, just the same, right? So we're saying, oh, it's allowed in this situation. So what do you mean? We should aser the shchiva achaisa. Midi havia isha shahach balam d'yasayam. Just like a woman who goes to another country. Lo dami ishto. When it comes to the wife, to b'mezid asira, that b'mezid it's aser, so midaraisa b'shagi gazer rabbanan. So the rabbanan are geyser. Says Rashi, to b'mezid mitzvah midaraisa d'chsev v'hilon espasam the mashma isura hilkach b'shagi gigain al pi based in gazer rabbanan. So in that situation, if it was b'shagig because she went based on the permission of the Beis Din said, "Oh, there's one witness, so he can get married." So the Rabbanan were geyser. As we continue to Sadi Hayam and Aleph, Achais Isha, when it comes to your wife's sister, to be amazed lo asim midaraisa b'shagigul goes a Rabbanan. Says Rashi, do you feel b'mezid ba al chaisa? If even a person has relation with a sister b'mezid, well mitzvah ishto eluye midaraisa, his wife will not be usher from him midaraisa. So therefore, Mishagi, the Chachamim are not geyser. Okay, we'll stop there. Let's see a couple questions. Question 6. Ksiv b'chamaisoi be'esh yisrafu oiso v'yashen. Rabbi Kiva oimer oisoi v'eshtehen. So mihen shtehen. Who are these two? Rabbi Kiva umal lomad mahai drasha. So according to one explanation, according to Abaye, hainu chamaiso im chamasoi. It's coming to tell you, did I read this? That not only, so when it says one or two, it means not only chamasoi, but even aim chamasoi. That if you would have relations with the chamaso, you're going to be chayiv, sreifa. Also, if it's aim chamaso, will be the same din. That's one shot. According to Rava, hainu ishto v'chamaso, v'lamed shebizman sheshten kayamois. Only when your wife and your mother-in-law are alive, chamaso b'sreifa. V'loi achar misas ishto, but not after your wife died. Let's see. Let's look at this Gemara one more time. That was Shitas Rava and Abaya, the Amr Mashmos Darshan Ikminayu. The Rabbi Shmuel Savar Chadaksiv, Rabbi Kiva Savar Tarti Ksiv. So when it says Tarti, it means that not only Chamaso, but also Eim Chamasai. Okay. TA 17. Kol Arai Shibetara Ein Sarach Get. And this is Rabbi Kiva. You don't need a get. Chutz Me'eshas Ish. When it comes to a married woman, Shnisis Alpi Eid Echad. Rabbi Kiva's Moisif Af Eshas Ach, the Achos Isha. Maduat Srichos Get Lo Rabbi Kiva. The question is, why does he require a get? And we said because that it's possible, we're talking about a situation of Kedushin, right? This is a very Ari Ba'ofen Shekidish Acha V'chayshinan Shema Yomer Tanai Haya B'Kedushin. So people are going to think, really the first marriage was nothing because the condition wasn't fulfilled. And in fact, the second one is the one that counts. So therefore, because of that, TA 617, that's the reason why the second person needs to give a get. But it's only because she kiddush achavas isha v'halchim dinas hayam. So because of that, there's this confusion regarding the kedushin, and they'll think that the second marriage is acceptable, which is the same thing when it came to the case of achos isha. Again, people will think there was a tanai and the kedushin that wasn't fulfilled, and therefore the second sister is the one that works. However, you can't say that when it comes to the Nisuin. When it comes to the Nisuin, obviously he was married to the first wife, and therefore he should be able to go back, and therefore it's not an issue. Fine. Question TB 18. Mishach Ishno Medina Siyam. So his wife traveled. V'nosas achaisa. He married his sister. V'yachach ba ishtoi, and his wife came. Muteres lachsaloi. So it says that he's allowed to go back to his original wife. Ma'ishna mi'isha shahach bala shasur lachsal bala im nises. So why is it different from an isha shahalach bala that the husband went, that it's usher for the husband to go back if he got remarried? So we said, and this is how we ended over here. Ishto, when it comes to the case of the wife, to be mazid asura midaraisa, so b'shagi gazer rabbanan, in that situation, the chachamim were geyser. So again, when it came to the case of the wife, that the husband went to Medina Siyam, so Meisha Shahach Bala, she also lachser Bala, she can't go back to her husband, and the reason is because there's an Issa Deraisa involved. So because there's Issa Deraisa, as it says, Ishto de Bemezid Asira Midaraisa, so because of the B'shegi Gazer B'Rabbanan, therefore the Chachamim are geyser. However, when it comes to the other situation, if the wife went to Medina Siyam and he married the sister, and then afterwards the first sister showed up, so he's allowed to go back over there. And the reason why we're lenient is because Achas Isha de B'mezid Lo Asur Midaraisa, that even if he would go to her B'mezid, it would not be an Isid, the Torah would not answer his first wife. So B'shageg Lo Gazer B'Rabbanan. So therefore B'shageg the Chachamim are not geyser either, and therefore they can go back to each other. Ad kan.